Football is a huge deal in the United States, but at what cost? And is it young black athletes who end up paying the price? A new movie called Him looks at some of the real-life criticism of the NFL and turns it into a horror movie. But does it land its message? I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Simonpillai and Sarah-Tai Black are here. Welcome back to Commotion.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Let's start off right here.
Cam, are you okay?
I think something's off.
Do you want to know what you're getting yourself into?
Now we playing some football!
Don't have to do this.
I've never been more certain of anything in my life. And how bad does Cameron Cade want it?
Wow. I mean, it's an intense trailer for sure. That's Tyreek Withers, Marlon Wayans, and Julia Fox in the trailer for Him. Rad, just quickly, without giving us too much, what is this movie about?
So look, I mean, Tyreek Withers, he's playing this young football prodigy who wants to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time, set back by this mysterious attack that leaves him with a concussion. But then he gets the opportunity to train with his hero, the guy he idolized his whole life, Isaiah White, played by Marlon Wayans. Basically, this guy invites him out to his kind of bleak estate out in the desert to then to do a 1 week boot camp, which he jumps at the opportunity for, jumps on that opportunity. And then things, this boot camp gets all like Black Swan, Rosemary's Baby, lots of nasty violence, lots of shocking imagery, and then these like kind of hints at conversations about concussions and race in football.
Sarah, we don't often get this kind of like sports horror hybrid. Did it work here for you?
It definitely didn't. I was in the theater with promise and potential for its first half, but it definitely biffs itself narratively at the end and kind of falls apart, which is a shame because I think that it's such a fresh and underexplored genre that like literally has so much potential given the corollary to reality in terms of like not just the physical labor of a sport like football, but the racialized labor of it, the history of that. There's literally a Wikipedia dedicated to anti-Black racism faced by American quarterbacks. So when you have a film like this, it kind of feels like there's one, the problem of the movie, and then there's two, the problem of the movie's marketing, where they're coalescing in this really problematic way, where on the one hand, you've got this movie marketing it as very much this Jordan role, blessed film. It's selling this movie as something that we're to infer it will have that kind of social critique lens that we see in Peele's work. So when the film kind of seems actually disinterested in exploring any of those kind of thematics, it feels really disingenuous.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get into the Jordan Peele aspect of that in a minute, Sarah-Tai, but Rad, the film talks, you mentioned Marlon Wayans playing this sort of like hero, this fading hero. And we know Wayans more for kind of his over-the-top characters in like White Chicks, the Scary Movie franchise. How does he fare in this more dramatic role?
I mean, I think he's making the most with this opportunity that he has, and he's really good, but in a movie that doesn't know what to do with that, right? And I think, Marlon Wayans is always good because he's always throwing himself at whatever role he has. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned how we typically know him for his spoofs, right? We know him for Scary Movies. We know him for 50 Shades of Black, these movies where he's spoofing Scream and 50 Shades of Grey, and he's spoofing movies that are typically not casting Black actors, right? He's spoofing movies that wouldn't necessarily make room for Marlon Wayans. So he exists, like the opportunities he has is spoofing, is in these spoofs.
Yeah, he's creating his own universe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's creating and then responding to kind of like, how black perspectives are left out of a lot of those stories. So, when it's sad that then now he has the opportunity to do something different. And he did as well when he did Requiem for a Dream, which, directed by Darren Aronofsky. And I feel like a lot of this movie can feel, like I mentioned Black Swan before, inspired by Darren Aronofsky. He was great in that, and he's doing a lot in this. He's intense. He's cutting that intensity with a lot of his humor. He's charming. He's sinister. But the thing is, by throwing a lot at it, like he's in a movie where the director directors don't seem to know what to do with that, right? And they just kind of leave him dangling.
Well, Sarah-Tai, let's talk about the Jordan Peele of it all, because you sort of mentioned that there's this expectation when you see that name that even though it's a horror film, it's going to reckon with some of these larger social issues. But he's not the director or the writer of this film. So do you still feel his sort of fingerprints all over this?
I want to say yes, but I also want to respect artistic autonomy, even though I do see this film as a bit of an artistic failure. I do think that having such Jordan Peele heavy marketing and social cultural influence over the way the film is positioned is kind of like a bit of racial trickery. It's a bit of a Trojan horse, but in the wrong way. I will say yes, love Marlon Wayans. 20 minutes of the movie, I was like, damn, I've had a crush on Marlon Wayans damn near 2/3 of my life.
Yeah.
And I love Jordan Peele. So I was really excited for this film. But the way that it kind of really doesn't engage with all of these very critical, overdue, underexplored themes. There are so many moments in the film where we're seeing Black bodies kind of represented as a kind of athletic chattel, and that's so rife for narrative commentary, but instead it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like how Quentin Tarantino has a little bit too much fence in the N-word, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at least with Quentin Tarantino, it still kind of belongs in the story world, whereas with him, you're hearing these things and you're taking them in within the context of that marketing, within the context of Peele, and the promise of this film is just not there, and it feels actually almost in bad faith, almost.
I mean, it's too bad because, like you say, we're living in this sort of Colin Kaepernick era of the NFL, and these are things that people are, I think, ready to engage with. So, Rad, it's not a very subtle critique of American football here, but Sarah-Tai mentions why it didn't work for her. So why didn't this film work for you?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately, it's what critique does this movie have, right? Both you and Sarah-Tai are pointing out all of these really pointed discussions that are existing out in the world about concussions in football, about race and racialized bodies and that labor in football. And again, there's bigger conversations that exist outside of this movie. But you have filmmakers who are mostly white, the writers are white, the director, Justin Tipping, he's half Filipino, half white, Danish or something. And, it feels like maybe they held back, or they just didn't feel, they were not equipped to handle whatever that conversation around the concussions and the race, whatever that conversation is. They felt ill-equipped to handle that. But then at the same time, that didn't stop them from using that topicality to make their movie saleable, to make this genre exercise saleable, and to pitch it so that they could then just throw a lot of marketing ad copy aesthetics into a genre exercise where even as a horror movie, it doesn't work. It's not. The shots are very random. I never actually. I felt anything that tried to be scary. And Sarah-Tai, I don't know if you agree, or disagree, but anything that tried to be scary felt like it was drowned out by the hyper style of the aesthetics.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very music video free association vibes.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad because the topic is one that seems like it's ready for this type of treatment. So I'm going to have to leave it there, but I really appreciate you diving into that. I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. We're going to move on now to talk about a new Netflix show called Black Rabbit, starring Jason Bateman and Jude Law. Here's a bit of the trailer.
Brother, should have told you. I know. Said to my face you'd squared it. I thought I could pay these guys back at a sure thing. How much do you owe them, Vince? Big number. What do you think happens? You don't pay back a loan for 3 years. Ain't such a big number for you, big deals.
That's a bit of the new miniseries Black Rabbit, just debuted last week on Netflix. Jude Law plays a former rock star turned restaurateur, and his life gets turned upside down when his estranged brother, played by Jason Bateman, re-enters with loan sharks on his tail. Rad, you've seen a couple of episodes. Are you into Black Rabbit?
I'm kind of half in, half out. I think I could watch Jude Law in anything, whether he's playing a horny priest or this guy that is, trying to run the restaurant business in New York. He's infinitely watchable. And I think there's a lot in this series that is a good distraction. I mean, it's very much like Netflix is trying to make The Bear meets Ozarks. And what if like The Bear leaned into the crime genre, like those little tiny elements of it. So it was entertaining enough in a very superficial way, but at the same time, I have not gone back after those 2 episodes, and that was like a month ago. So it's not compelling me to stick around.
Sarah-Tai, at the core of this show are these 2 brothers. And so you're really relying on that chemistry between Jude Law and Jason Bateman. Does it work for them? It's kind of a surprising pair. So I'm curious what you think about their sort of vibe on screen.
I think it works. And I think as someone who's like not the target demographic for either of these actors, I think that the fact that I think it works is a good sign. I think Jason Bateman is kind of, if not playing to type, then playing to his strengths, like bringing a lot of like comedy and like whip smart kind of comments to his role. I really enjoyed Jude Law, despite the fact that he cannot do an American accent. He's slipping into like a Baldwin Brothers Boston in and out throughout the whole series. But I like the way they play off each other. And I think that the screenwriting and them as actors did a really good job of exploring what it means when you think you're a bad person, but you want to be good, and you think you're a good person and you want to be bad. Like, what does it mean to kind of not be able to meet your own moral standards?
Who do you think the audience is for this show, Sarah-Tai? Because it's being marketed as kind of like the next big Netflix binge. Rad sort of mentioned it's like The Bear meets Ozark. Who's this show for?
I think if you like shows about ambiguous, complicated characters, things like Shameless, you could even say Girls. I was thinking a lot about the show Search Party, which is very, very different. It's very like comedic, but it's this like you have to distance yourself and just observe these people doing morally questionable things. I think it's a really overdue take on like, what are those white guys from the 2010s in Brooklyn up to now? Like that, I felt actually a little bit personally attacked because it was so spot on in that kind of envisioning of what those kind of indie rockers might be up to now. But yeah, I think it's worth a watch.
Okay. I mean, not anything that you two are overly psyched about, but in that regard, like, let's get some recommendations from each of you quickly on what you are really excited about, whether it's a book or a movie or a TV show. Rad, why don't we start with you?
I mean, look, tonight, The Lowdown premieres on FX. It'll be on Disney Plus all over like the world tomorrow. And so if you haven't canceled your subscription in protest to the Jimmy Kimmel thing, and you still have your Disney Plus subscription, like that show, it's the new show from Sterling Harjo, who made Reservation Dogs. He created Reservation Dogs. It's like this pulpy Tulsa noir starring Ethan Hawke, who appeared in Reservation Dogs. A lot of the same community that Sterling Harjo made Reservation Dogs with is back in this show, and it is just so fun and so delightful. And there's just so many layers to it, and I heartily recommend it because that's definitely one of the best shows of the year.
Oh, I like to hear that. Sarah-Tai, what about you?
I'm going to recommend My Father's Shadow, directed by Akinola Davies. It was at TIFF. It's a really moving, like kind of stunning debut feature about these 2 young boys from Lagos who are figuring out their family dynamics with their dad alongside like the 1993 election crisis in Nigeria. And it stars Sope Diriso, who is in Black Rabbit, and he's really amazing in it.
I love that, Ty. I love the connection that you just made there. And also, Akinola Davies is on Q with Tom Power this week, so you can hear that conversation on wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much, both of you, for having this conversation. Really appreciate the chat.
Thanks for having us.
Rad Simonpillai is a freelance film critic in Toronto. You can find his work at the Globe and Mail, CTV's Your Morning, and right here on Commotion. Sarah-Tai Black is a film critic in Toronto. You can find their work at the Globe and Mail, CBC Arts, and here on Commotion. And you can read their full review on him in the Globe.
Okay,
That's a bit of Michael Jackson's 1987 hit Smooth Criminal, performed by the cast of MJ the Musical. Since premiering on Broadway in 2022, MJ has toured around the world and scooped up 4 Tony Awards, and it just kicked off a 6-week run in Toronto last week. But can a jukebox musical give us any fresh insight into someone as complicated and controversial as Michael Jackson? Joshua Chong reviewed MJ for the Toronto Star, and he's here now to tell us what he thinks. Welcome back to the show, Josh.
Good morning.
So before we get into the details of this new production of MJ, can you just set the scene and sort of explain how this musical first came to be?
Yeah, so this musical was supposed to premiere in mid-2020. Of course, the pandemic delayed that. So it premiered on Broadway 2 years later in 2022. There was so much hype around this. Of course, people were expecting a Michael Jackson jukebox musical to come one time or another. But the timing was very suspicious. It came just a few years after Leaving Neverland, that documentary, of course, where 2 men alleged that they were sexually abused by Michael Jackson as a child. He and his estate had previously denied that when he was alive. So that raised a lot of eyebrows. Me personally, it came across a bit of a character rehabilitation, character posthumous rehabilitation, right? And this show was approved by his estate. So the timing was really suspicious for me and for a lot of people in the theater industry as well.
Okay, so now give us a sense of how they go about telling this story of Michael Jackson.
So it is a typical biographical jukebox musical. It's set in 1992. Just as Michael Jackson is about to embark on his Dangerous World Tour. There's this framing device that playwright Lynn Nottage uses. 2 MTV documentarians are going into the rehearsal room and are trying to interview Michael Jackson as he's preparing for this tour. And as they ask him questions, he has these flashback memories. So it's a typical jukebox musical. The role of Michael Jackson is broken down into 3 different characters. You have Little Michael, Middle Michael, the older MJ, and you have these flashback sequences when he kind of remembers his childhood, remembers his adolescence, back to the Jackson 5, when he kind of breaks out into his solo career. So it's a typical jukebox trope, and it's employed here, as is done, we've seen before in so many other shows.
Okay, I actually want to play a clip from MJ. Have a listen to this.
And now we're back in time. An old movie, The Elements. And one by one I invite my dance heroes onto the stage. We meet Fred Astaire.
Hey kid, you're an angry dancer. I like that.
Bob Fosse.
You have to sell everything, from the tipping of your hat to the flourish of your fingers.
And the Nicholas Brothers.
It's all about the rhythm, baby.
Can you explain now what we just heard and why this was a standout moment for you?
This, for me, by far, was the best part of the musical. This is from the first 15 minutes of the second act. And what Lynn Nottage does here, along with director and choreographer Christopher Wheeldon, is they kind of do away with that awkward framing device, the 2 MTV documentarians. And it becomes really an artist's retrospective, a dance retrospective, to be specific. And Christopher Wheeldon, the director and choreographer, brings audiences through a journey looking at Michael Jackson's influences, right? His dance influences. Fred Astaire, Bob Fosse, the Nicholas Brothers. It's a genius sequence, and then it leads so smoothly into Smooth Criminal, which is the big number at the top of Act 2. And for me, that's the number that they've been using for years now to promote this musical. They performed it in the Tony Awards and edited its jukebox musical perfection.
Now, I'm not sure a jukebox musical is the right setting for a story as thorny as Michael Jackson's. You mentioned it's sort of being played in these 3 different eras, but as we now know from his life, like his childhood wasn't necessarily a happy one. There were a lot of struggles in his middle and later life as well. So, talk to me about how it sort of approaches some of those thornier issues in his life.
It doesn't really cover all those thorny issues, at least not completely. You know, when you're embarking on a jukebox musical, there's always this question, can you separate the art from the artist? I think it is possible, but what this musical is asking audiences to do is to consider some aspects of Michael Jackson's life, but ignore some of the others. So they're asking you to consider, you know, his troubled childhood, some of the abuse that he experienced at the hands of his father, his drug use. But then it's also asking you to, you know, ignore some of these thornier aspects, the allegations. It's very conveniently set in 1992, this musical, a year before some of those most serious allegations came forward. And I don't think that, you know, you can have a complete retrospective of a man if you don't explore and you don't discuss everything about his life. So it's tough, right? I think you can separate Michael Jackson, the artist, and his wonderful art from what he's doing, but this show kind of wants to have its cake and eat it at the same time.
Right. I mean, you mentioned sort of this attempt to rehabilitate his image, which is much changed from 1992 and even from 2022. You know, how strong do you think the Michael Jackson brand is in 2025?
You know, just going back to 2022 when this show premiered, Broadway was struggling back then. And, you know, there was just a New York Times story that came out earlier this week that said since the pandemic, only 10% of Broadway musicals have recouped their initial investment, right? It costs millions to put on a Broadway production. This Michael Jackson musical was one of them. So I don't know what it is. I think these allegations came forward before the Me Too era. He has something about him that people are maybe willing to see past that and buy a ticket. And you're seeing it here in Toronto as well. Ticket sales are strong. This is not a long-running production. It's a limited touring run, running for 6 weeks. I think it's probably going to sell out or probably close to selling out.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask, do you think it's going to have the same Broadway success, but you do feel this will be a sellout?
I think so. Just because of the name. And I think there's also been a bit of distance as well from that Leaving Neverland doc. If it was able to succeed on Broadway in 2022, 3 years after that documentary came out, it's been 5-6 years now. Unfortunately, I think perhaps that documentary has faded from the minds of general audiences.
And you're not sure about it critically. You said it wasn't a great musical.
No, and it's gotten mixed reviews across the board ever since it premiered in New York. It went to London. It's been to Australia as well. It's gotten mixed reviews by critics all over the world who have had similar concerns about, you know, how it depicts Michael Jackson as the man.
Well, Josh, really appreciate you having this conversation with us. Thanks for being on Commotion.
Thank you.
Joshua Chong is an arts critic at the Toronto Star. MJ the Musical runs at the CAA Ed Mirvish Theatre in Toronto until November 2nd.